Attorney General Eric Holder makes this comment that people are piling on because this is a way to get at the president, to get at him, and the fact that they're both African Americans. Is this, in your mind, a sign of desperation? When all else fails, you got to pull out the race card?
Well, if there is a word that is more extreme than desperation, number one, I can't find it, but it would be more applicable. There is absolutely nothing involving race in Fast and Furious. If the Attorney General really thinks that a congressional committee asking who in DOJ approved this, who thought it was a good idea, you have a dead Border Patrol agent, at least one, you have scores, hundreds of dead Mexican citizens, and the Attorney General seems to retreat to talking about immutable characteristics. No one has mentioned race in Fast and Furious. It is as racially neutral as anything we have discussed in Congress for the first 11 months.
That's for sure. And he sits there and he accuses you of playing political games. And isn't that exactly what he's doing? All the Terry family wants to know is why. Answer our questions, and we won't keep calling you back.
Well, they've tried at least a handful of different ways now. At first, they said, well, Fast and Furious was fine, but only when problems developed. They refused to acknowledge it was flawed from its inception. And then secondly, they pivoted or tried to pivot to a broader conversation about the Second Amendment and gun laws. And that didn't work. And now he's pivoting to race. And it's also important what else he said in that New York Times interview. He said he's a target because of his progressive agenda. And I sat there and thought to myself, there's a reason that Lady Justice is blindfolded. She shouldn't be able to tell whether you're a progressive or a conservative, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. That's why we have respect for justice, is because it is colorblind and it is ideologically blind. And for him to say, number one, for him to acknowledge, I am a progressive in the way that I administer the responsibilities of the Attorney General's office, to me, what an indicting commentary on yourself to say you're using that office to push a progressive agenda.
Yeah.
If you want to do that, then go to another cabinet level of position, but don't go to the Department of Justice. His race has absolutely nothing to do with Fast and Furious. If he'll answer some fairly basic questions, who knew what when, what have you done to fix it, where's the accountability, where's the acceptance of responsibility, then perhaps the committees will be satisfied. But I've had more people tell me that even though they initially did not think Fast and Furious was that big of an issue, his behavior, his reaction to it has confirmed that it must be.
You mentioned justice, and I know the Terry family is saying, where is the justice in this? You're back home. What are you hearing from your constituents? Are they aware of what's going on?
They're becoming more aware of it, and thanks to your radio show and a handful of other media outlets for publicizing Fast and Furious. We've been dealing with this in Congress since February, but it's beginning to get on people's radar screens. Well, when you have dead law enforcement officers and dead citizens in Mexico, and then when they see these feeble attempts to either justify or avoid discussing it, and then to trot out, as Alan West from Florida, and Alan is able to say it in a way that I cannot say it, but Alan West, a great freshman congressman from Florida, said it's the last card in the deck. When all else fails, let's talk about immutable characteristics, because how can you defend yourself against a charge of racism? Yes. I mean, I can't prove to you a negative. I can just tell you this. If there's anything race-neutral in the world or ideologically neutral in the world, it is asking, Mr. Attorney General, who in the Department of Justice approved Fast and Furious?
I think we really all need to be concerned, considering the fact that the Attorney General testified. He admitted that all of us, we're all going to feel the impact of this for years to come.
There are thousands of weapons that are unaccounted for. There is a war going on in Mexico. There are innocent citizens being killed there. Our law enforcement is at risk. The reputation of our federal law enforcement entities has been impacted. And most regrettably to me, aside from the loss of life, which is the most regrettable,
Yes.
we have an institution, the Department of Justice, which should be as apolitical and nonpartisan as any component of government, and it has been politicized.
Yep.
That we cannot have if we're going to survive as a republic where people have confidence in the civil and criminal justice systems when you overtly politicize law enforcement.
Congressman Issa has asked Holder to come back in January. Now, if he does, what will you do different? What will you try to do to get him to once and for all answer these questions?
Well, you can't make somebody answer a question.
Yeah.
I learned that 16 years the hard way in a courtroom.
Yes.
But the fact that you continue to ask questions that people view as legitimate. Now, if we ask illegitimate questions, then public opinion would not be on our side. But when you ask legitimate questions and you get evasive responses, I think the next tack that I will probably take is to ask the Inspector General when we can expect the results of her investigation, because she was appointed in February. We're actually not that far away from the one-year anniversary.
I know.
There have been civilizations that have been formed in 12 months, and it's about time for her to conclude, or it's certainly appropriate for us to ask, what time frame are you on? Because if you think you can slow walk this thing through the next presidential election cycle, number one, it undercuts your credibility. Number two, we're going to continue to ask questions, whether we have your IG report or not. The other thing to keep in mind is we're still getting documents from the Department of Justice, and each time documents are produced leads to a new round of questions. So we're not – he'll be out of answers long before we're out of questions.
Yeah. Who else do you want to see come testify before your committee?
Well, there are, even if we don't call them for public hearings, there are depositions being taken and there are sworn statements being taken privately. I obviously want to ask Gary Grindler, the Attorney General's Chief of Staff, who knew about Fast and Furious in 2010. Lanny Brewer, I don't believe Congress has had, the House has not had an opportunity to have Mr. Brewer before a committee of Congress, although the Senate has. There's a DOJ official, Jason Weinstein. There's James Trusty. There are others whose names consistently appear in emails, and putting somebody under oath, and I have every expectation that people who work for the Department of Justice, when they're placed under oath, are going to give truthful responses, but nothing quite gets people's attention by quite like raising their right hand.